My name is Evan Callahan, I'm 38 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. This is the story of how an old, cracked briefcase turned everything I believed about my family upside down. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. The scent of oak polish and old cigars still clung to my father's office inside Callahan and Sons Developments, even 2 weeks after he'd passed. I stood near the bookshelf while my older brother Ryan lifted a glass of champagne, grinning like a man who'd just conquered a kingdom. $50 million, Ryan said, his voice echoing in the mahogany-paneled room. The entire empire. The hotels, the ranches, Dad's collection, every bit of it mine. He laughed, holding the legal documents aloft as if they were a crown. Uncle Charles, our father's lifelong attorney, adjusted his glasses and gave me a brief, uncertain look. Well, Charles said, clearing his throat, that's not entirely true. There's something here for you too, Evan. Ryan smirked, already pouring champagne into a mug. Oh right, can't forget the family disappointment. What did Dad leave you, little brother? A thank you card for teaching chemistry instead of joining the company? I didn't answer. At 38, I'd spent my adult life teaching high school science instead of building hotels. Ryan had followed Dad's every step, taking over projects across Dallas and Houston. He dressed in tailored suits, I wore wrinkled khakis and chalk dust. Uncle Charles reached under his desk and pulled something heavy into the light. My breath caught. A briefcase, scuffed, brown leather, its brass corners green with corrosion. The handle was cracked and wrapped in electrical tape. Your father wanted you to have this, Charles said softly. He pushed it across the table toward me. Ryan burst out laughing. You've got to be kidding. That thing? That's Dad's old sales briefcase from the 70s, before he even owned a hotel. He used to brag about carrying insurance forms door to door in that fossil. He leaned forward, shaking his head. Guess he figured you should start where he did. 40 years late. My mother's face flickered on a laptop screen beside us, Vivian Callahan, calling from her condo in Naples, Florida. She didn't say a word, just watched. She'd remarried long ago, but her silence was louder than any reaction. Anything you want to add, Viv? Uncle Charles asked. Your father always had his reasons, she said quietly. Then the screen went black. Ryan lifted his glass. Well, Evan, when you get tired of grading lab reports, maybe I'll find you a job at one of the hotels. Bell service, maybe janitorial, you're good with helping people, right? He clapped my shoulder and strode out, already dialing someone to celebrate. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. I stood there, holding that battered briefcase. For a moment, Uncle Charles met my eyes. He didn't look pitying. He looked expectant, as if he knew something I didn't. Dad's will should have been simple. He'd built the Callahan Hospitality Group from a single roadside in outside San Antonio into a chain of 17 properties across the South. Ryan had been his protege from day one, sharp, ruthless, and charming in the boardroom. I'd chosen beakers and lesson plans instead. Dad never understood. You're wasting your potential, Evan, he used to say. Ryan builds legacies. You build science projects. The last time I saw him alive was his 71st birthday party. Ryan had rented out the ballroom of the flagship hotel in Dallas. I arrived late, still in my teaching clothes. Dad saw me across the room, surrounded by mayors and investors, and simply shook his head. Now, sitting in Charles's office, it all made a grim kind of sense. Charles cleared his throat and began reading from the official will. To my eldest son, Ryan Patrick Callahan, I leave full ownership of Callahan Hospitality Group, including all assets, real estate, and holdings, valued at approximately $50 million. Ryan leaned back, smug. Charles hesitated before continuing. To my younger son, Evan James Callahan, I leave this. He placed the briefcase in front of me again, like a judge setting down a verdict. The brass hinges creaked, one latch bent at an awkward angle. My mother's expression on the laptop shifted, something flashed in her eyes, too brief to name. Fear? Recognition? That night, I drove back to my modest apartment on the east side of Austin. The briefcase sat on my kitchen table under the flickering fluorescent light. Ryan had already texted 16 times, photos of him in Dad's office chair, posing with the Bentley, sipping champagne beside the mansion pool. Don't worry, little brother, one message read. I'll save you a bellhop uniform. I ignored him. The briefcase was heavier than it looked, but the locks were rusted shut. I tried a screwdriver, then a paperclip. Nothing moved. I could have smashed it open, but something about the look on Uncle Charles's face stopped me. That strange, waiting expression. Around midnight, I called Jasmine Walker, my colleague who taught shop class. Evan, it's midnight. You okay? I need your help, I said. Can you open something without breaking it? Now you've got me curious, she replied. Bring it by in the morning. I spent the rest of the night searching online for anything about Dad's early years. The official company website told the clean version, from one Texas into a Southern legacy. But an archived 1976 newspaper photo stopped me cold. Dad stood in front of his first motel, smiling, holding this exact briefcase. The caption read, "Never forget where you started," says Raymond Callahan. I stared at the picture until dawn. That line, "Never forget where you started," would mean a lot more than I ever imagined. The next morning, the sky over Austin was gray and heavy, the kind of weather that made the city feel smaller somehow. I got to Lincoln High before sunrise, the old briefcase riding shotgun on my passenger seat like a quiet passenger with secrets. Jasmine Walker was already in the woodshop, her sleeves rolled up, sorting drill bits into a tray. When she saw me, her eyebrows lifted. "Now that," she said, nodding at the briefcase, "looks like it's been through a war." "Probably has," I said, setting it on her bench. "The locks won't open. I think Dad might have sealed them on purpose." She leaned in, examining the latches with the same focus she used when grading projects. "These are old. German-made. Expensive for their time. Whatever's in here, he didn't want anyone getting to it easily." She sprayed lubricant into the mechanism, worked a set of picks in slow circles. "You sure you want this open? People lock things for a reason." I hesitated. "He left Ryan everything else. This is all I got. I need to know why." For a while, the only sound was the faint scrape of metal tools. Then, click. One lock gave way. The sound was so sharp it echoed against the concrete walls. Jasmine grinned. "That's one." The second lock was tougher, almost fused shut. She worked for another 10 minutes before it finally popped open with a metallic sigh. "Whatever's in there," she said, "someone didn't want you finding it fast." My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped neatly in plastic, were a stack of old papers and a single yellowed envelope with my name, Evan, written in Dad's familiar, bold handwriting. I tore it open. "Go to Lone Star National Bank, downtown Austin branch. Account number 0037. Tell them you're picking up for Raymond Callahan. They'll know what to do." That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just those lines. Jasmine looked over my shoulder. "That's cryptic." "Dad was never cryptic," I said. "He said exactly what he meant. Usually twice. Then whatever this is, he wanted it hidden." "You're going to the bank, aren't you?" "I have to." The next morning, I called in sick, a first in 10 years of teaching. The school principal sounded surprised. "Everything okay, Mr. Callahan?" "Family matter," I said. Not untrue. The drive downtown took 40 minutes in rush hour traffic. The Lone Star National Bank branch stood like an old monument between glass office towers, white limestone, brass doors, engraved pillars. A relic from when Texas built things to last. Inside, everything smelled faintly of leather and polish. The ceiling arched high, painted with faded murals of ranchers and oil barons. I approached the teller desk, where a young woman with a name tag reading Maria Chen smiled politely. "I'm here about account 0037, I said. "Picking up for Raymond Callahan." Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She stared at the screen for a few seconds too long, then said, "One moment please." She picked up the phone and whispered into the receiver. "Someone will assist you shortly." 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, a door labeled private banking opened, and a tall man in his 60s stepped out. Silver hair. Expensive navy suit. He carried the weight of authority the way some men carry regret. "Mr. Callahan," he said. "I'm William Thornton, branch director. We've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" I echoed. "Yes. Your father made arrangements years ago. Please, come with me." We walked past marble columns and down a narrow hallway lined with portraits of past presidents of the bank. He scanned a key card, opening a brass elevator I hadn't noticed before. "As we descended," he said, "your father opened account 0037 in 1974. He left explicit instructions that only he, or you, upon his passing, could access it." 74? I repeated. "That was before the first Callahan Hotel." "Correct. A full year earlier." The elevator opened onto a basement vault that looked straight out of a movie, rows of safety deposit boxes glinting under soft fluorescent light. The air was cold, still, and clean. Thornton led me to a box near the corner. "This is the one. I'll need your identification, Mr. Callahan." I handed over my license. He checked something on his tablet, then nodded. "There are 2 keys required, mine, and yours." "I don't have a key," I said. Thornton gave a faint smile. "Your father said you might say that. He told me to tell you to check the lining." "The lining of what?" I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I turned toward the briefcase I'd been carrying. The lining. My heart started pounding. Carefully, I ran my fingers along the inside seams. In the corner, where the leather had separated, something hard pressed against my fingertip. I pulled it free, a tiny brass key, tarnished with age. Thornton's smile deepened. Your father was a careful man. We inserted our keys at the same time. The lock clicked, deep and final. Thornton lifted the long metal box from the vault wall and set it on the table. I'll give you privacy, he said. When you're done, press that button on the wall. Then he left, closing the heavy door behind him. The air felt charged. I opened the metal container slowly. Inside were bundles of old cash, gold certificates, and bearer bonds wrapped in paper bands marked from the 1970s. I flipped through a few, $100,000 each. There had to be millions sitting there, untouched for decades. But beneath the money was something heavier, a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. I opened it and froze. The first page was a birth certificate. My own. But under father's name, it didn't say Raymond Callahan. It said Vincent Corrado. I blinked, reading it twice, 3 times. My hands started to shake. The next document was a newspaper clipping, an old one, browned with time. Federal witness killed in car explosion outside Dallas courthouse. The article said Vincent Corrado, a businessman set to testify against a crime family's money laundering operations, had died when his car exploded in 1985. I felt the room tilt. The air pressed against my lungs. My father, no, the man I thought was my father, had left me this. And suddenly I understood why Mom's eyes had looked like that. Why she hung up so fast on the call. This briefcase wasn't an insult. It was a message. A secret 50 years old that had just been handed to me. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at that birth certificate, the edges trembling in my hands. The words swam until they stopped making sense. Father, Vincent Corrado. Not Raymond Callahan. Not the man whose voice I still heard every time I doubted myself. For nearly 4 decades, I'd believed I was his son, his disappointment, sure, but still his. And now a yellowed sheet of paper was telling me otherwise. I turned to the next document, an old Chicago Tribune clipping dated March 15, 1985. The headline, Federal Witness Dies in Courthouse Car Explosion. It described how a businessman named Vincent Corrado had been cooperating with the FBI, preparing to testify against the Torelli crime family, who'd laundered millions through legitimate businesses across the South. Before he could take the stand, his car exploded outside a Dallas courthouse. The explosion was so precise, investigators believed it had been timed to the second. No one else was injured. That, the article said, was suspiciously convenient. My stomach turned. I flipped to the next page, photographs taped to paper, all black and white, edges curling from age. In one, a young Vivian, my mother, stood outside what looked like a motel construction site. 2 men stood beside her, one unmistakably Raymond Callahan, younger but with that same commanding posture, and another man who looked eerily like me. The caption had no names, but it didn't need them. That man, Vincent Corrado, could have been my reflection in a vintage mirror. In the next photo, Vincent and Raymond were shaking hands over blueprints, both smiling. Another showed them at a Christmas party, laughing, and in Vincent's arms, a baby. Me. My throat went dry. The date scrawled on the back read December 1986. The folder wasn't done with me yet. Beneath the photos was a stack of legal contracts, stamped, notarized, and signed by both men. Across the top, Corrado Callahan Enterprises Incorporated, 1974 Partnership Agreement. I skimmed through paragraphs until one sentence hit me like a punch. Upon the death of either partner, their shares shall transfer to their eldest male heir upon reaching the age of 40. If no heir existed, the surviving partner would inherit all. I froze. Vincent Corrado had died when I was barely 1 year old. And I was his heir. That meant that when I turned 40, I'd inherit 30% of the entire Callahan empire. The hotels, the properties, all of it. Ryan might have inherited Dad's shares, but not Vincent's. Not mine. I leaned against the cold steel table, my pulse thundering in my ears. So that was why Dad had left me this briefcase. Why Mom's eyes had flashed with fear. Why Uncle Charles had looked at me like he knew something was coming. Dad hadn't left me nothing. He'd left me everything, I just hadn't known how to open it. There was one last envelope at the bottom of the folder. Handwritten, dated just 3 weeks before his death. My name on the front. I sat down before opening it. Inside, the letter began. Evan. If you're reading this, then you're standing in the vault, and the truth has finally found you. Your real father was Vincent Corrado, my business partner and best friend. We met in 1973, when I was selling insurance and he was looking for legitimate places to move his money. He wasn't a criminal, but he was surrounded by them. The Betrayals trusted him, until he decided to testify against them. When the explosion took him, your mother came to me carrying you in her arms. You were barely 14 months old. The FBI said the Betrayals would come for anyone tied to Vincent, including his child. So, we did the only thing we could, we erased you. Vivian and I created a story that you were my son from an affair. Patricia, my wife at the time, agreed to the lie. She raised you as her own. The Betrayals believed Vincent's bloodline had ended. You grew up safe, hidden under my name. Every harsh word I ever said, every time I called you a failure, it wasn't because I hated you. It was because I needed you to stay invisible. The Betrayals would ignore a schoolteacher, but they'd never ignore a hotel heir. Now you know the truth. Vincent's partnership agreement is ironclad. On your 40th birthday, his shares, 30% of the empire, will legally transfer to you. Ryan will fight it. Let him. The papers are airtight. I made sure of that. Use the money in this box however you wish, but be careful when you claim what's yours. The Torelli family has long memories, even if most of them are dead or locked away. Your mother knows everything. The man she's married to now, Philip, was FBI. He's still protecting her. Protecting you, too. You were never my disappointment, Evan. You were my greatest success. Because you lived. Raymond Callahan. I sat there for a long time, the letter shaking in my hands. All those years I thought I'd been ignored, belittled, unwanted, when in truth, every cruel word had been a shield. My father, both of them, had been fighting to keep me alive. I closed the metal box and pressed the pearl button on the wall. A soft chime echoed. Moments later, Thornton returned. Will you be removing the contents today, Mr. Callahan? No, I said quietly. Not yet. He nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Your father paid for the box through 2035. It'll be here when you're ready. When I stepped out of the bank, the Texas sun hit my face, blinding and bright. For the first time, I understood why the briefcase had felt so heavy. It wasn't the leather or the locks. It was the truth it carried. And the weight of two fathers who'd each loved me in their own broken way. By the time I drove back to East Austin, the sun had melted into the horizon. My apartment looked the same as always, quiet, ordinary, small. But I wasn't the same person who'd left that morning. On my kitchen table sat the briefcase, open now, its once tarnished brass corners catching the last bits of evening light. Inside was the letter, Raymond's letter, folded neatly. Beside it lay a new reality I hadn't yet learned how to live in. I barely slept that night. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that signature, Vincent Corrado, ghosted against every document I'd ever known. By morning, I'd made a decision. There was one man who had to answer for this, Uncle Charles. I showed up at his downtown law office unannounced. His secretary, a polite woman with the patience of a saint, told me he was in a meeting. I didn't care. I walked straight past her and opened his door. Charles looked up, calm as ever, like he'd expected me. He didn't even flinch when I dropped Raymond's letter on his desk. You knew, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant even to me. You knew everything. He took off his reading glasses and folded them neatly on the table. Yes, he said simply. I did. I stared at him, waiting for a denial, an excuse, anything. He gave me none. I drew up the original partnership contracts, he continued. I witnessed Vincent's wedding to your mother. I was there when they formed Corrado Callahan Enterprises. When Vincent died, I was the one who helped your mother disappear. And I helped Raymond rewrite his will to protect you. Protect me? I snapped. By lying to me for 38 years? He sighed. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Raymond hoped he'd be alive to tell you himself, when it was safe. I sank into the chair opposite his desk, the exhaustion of the past 2 days catching up with me. Safe, I muttered. He said I'd inherit 30% when I turned 40. Charles nodded slowly. 18 months from now, yes. The contract's ironclad. Ryan can't stop it. He'll try, of course. He'll rage, threaten, maybe even file injunctions, but legally, there's nothing he can do. Vincent was too smart. Raymond made sure the paperwork was bulletproof. And you? I asked. Why didn't you tell me? He hesitated, then leaned back. Because your life depended on staying invisible. The Torelli family may have lost their old power, but there were still eyes out there. The less you knew, the safer you were. I ran my hands over my face. Ryan's going to lose his mind. Oh, he will, Charles said with a faint smile. But when that day comes, you'll walk into his boardroom with proof that not only are you a legitimate heir, you're legally his partner. Partner? I repeated. 30%, he said. That's a controlling block in corporate terms. You'll have veto power, voting rights, access to all company records. You won't just own part of the empire, you'll have a say in how it runs. The idea made me feel both powerful and nauseous. He'll never accept that. He doesn't have to, Charles said. He can scream, but the law doesn't care how loud he is. I let out a slow breath. And the Torellis? Raymond said they'd moved on. Mostly, Charles said carefully. Anthony Torelli died in federal prison 5 years ago. His son, Michael, runs a steakhouse in Phoenix now. No criminal record. No heat. Still, I'd advise caution. The old world doesn't forget easily. He leaned forward, voice softening. Evan, your father wasn't just protecting a secret. He was protecting a bloodline. Vincent's death nearly destroyed your mother. Raymond carried that guilt every day of his life. Everything he built for you, even if he had to make you hate him to do it. I stared at the letter on his desk. He succeeded, I said quietly. I hated him for years. Charles nodded, eyes glinting. And that hatred kept you alive. The next day, I returned to school. My students didn't notice anything different. Mr. Callahan still lectured about chemical bonds and molecular polarity like nothing had changed. But inside, everything was different. Ryan kept sending messages, photos of him redecorating Dad's office, changing the company logo, firing staff. Making some upgrades, he texted one night. Callahan and Company has to evolve without Dad holding it back. I replied the same way every time, congrats. Looks great. Keep it up. He had no idea. Each night, after grading papers, I opened Raymond's letter again, reading the same line over and over. You were my greatest success, because you lived. I'd read it so many times, I could hear his voice saying it. By the end of the week, I booked a flight to Florida. There was only one person left who could fill in the missing pieces, my mother. Her condo overlooked the ocean, pale blue waves crashing against the shore. She was sitting by the pool, wearing sunglasses, reading a book about orchids. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. Just tired. You went to the bank, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Why didn't you ever tell me? She closed her book slowly. Because you would have wanted to know more. And knowing more would have put you in danger. Vincent Corrado, I said. He was my real father. Her lips trembled. He was the love of my life. More than anyone before or since. And I loved Raymond too, not the same way, but deeply enough to let him protect you. And Philip? I asked. The man you married after the divorce? She gave a faint, knowing smile. FBI. He was on the original task force that handled Vincent's case. He still keeps tabs. Calls it insurance. I sank into the chair beside her. The ocean roared faintly in the background. Mom, all those years, you let me think Dad didn't love me. Would you have believed anything else? She asked softly. He played the villain because villains live. Heroes get killed. Her words hit harder than any revelation so far. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she reached out, placed a hand over mine, and said, You've carried enough ghosts, Evan. Don't let revenge make you one of them. I looked out at the waves. I don't want revenge, I said. I want truth. She smiled faintly. Then you already have what you need. That night, I sat on the balcony, listening to the ocean. The briefcase sat beside me, its leather newly polished, its secrets now exposed. In 18 months, I'd walk into Ryan's boardroom and drop the truth on the table like a detonator. Not to destroy him, but to finally let the ghosts rest. And to show the world that even a teacher from Austin could rewrite the legacy of an empire built on lies. 18 months. That's how long I carried the truth in silence, teaching chemistry by day, rewriting my entire identity by night. Each morning, I woke up as Mr. Callahan, the same teacher my students knew. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone else staring back, Evan Corrado, the son of a man the world thought had vanished in flames. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jasmine. The briefcase stayed locked in my closet, its secrets known only to me and a handful of people who'd helped hide them decades ago. Ryan, meanwhile, was thriving in his illusion. He took over the empire completely, new branding, new luxury properties, interviews on business magazines where he called himself the next generation of Callahan innovation. He'd stand on stage with that easy, smug confidence that used to make Dad proud, talking about legacy and family and vision. And every time, I'd think, you have no idea what's coming. The night before my 40th birthday, I couldn't sleep. The Texas wind howled through the window like something restless, ancient. I poured a glass of bourbon, the expensive kind this time, and sat at my kitchen table. The briefcase was in front of me again, now restored and gleaming. Inside, I kept 2 photographs. One of Vincent Corrado, holding baby me, standing beside my mother. The other of Raymond Callahan, serious as ever, standing behind me at my high school graduation, hand on my shoulder. Two fathers. One gave me life. The other gave me a way to survive it. At dawn, I got dressed, a dark gray suit, crisp white shirt, the tie Dad gave me years ago that I'd never worn. On the passenger seat of my car sat a folder. Inside it were copies of every contract, every notarized clause, every photograph, and a certified letter from Uncle Charles's firm confirming the validity of the inheritance transfer. When I pulled into the headquarters of Callahan Hospitality Group in downtown Dallas, I half expected security to stop me. They didn't. Ryan's assistant, a young woman named Kendra, greeted me nervously. "He's expecting you," she said, though her tone suggested she had no idea why. Ryan's office looked different now, Dad's cigar scent replaced by modern cologne and sleek minimalism. He was standing behind the glass desk, talking on the phone. When he saw me, he smiled in that patronizing, practiced way. "Well, if it isn't Professor Callahan," he said, hanging up. "What brings you to the Empire today? Need a donation for your school?" I placed the folder on his desk. "You might want to sit down." He chuckled. "What is this? You finally found your dad's old test papers." "Something like that," I said. "They're legal documents. From 1974. He frowned, flipping open the folder. His eyes moved over the partnership agreement, the signatures, the line about heirs. Then his smirk faltered. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said quietly, "that on my 40th birthday, which is today, 30% of Callahan Hospitality legally transfers to me." He laughed, an ugly, sharp sound. "That's impossible. Dad left you nothing." "He left me Vincent Corrado's shares." He froze. His face lost all color. "Who?" "Our real father," I said. "Yours and mine were never the same." He slammed his hands on the desk. "You're insane." I slid a photocopy of my birth certificate across the table. He stared at it. Then the newspaper clipping. Then the letter from Charles's office verifying everything. His breathing quickened. "This is a joke. Some kind of sick setup." "No joke," I said evenly. Corrado Callahan Enterprises was built by two men. When one died, his heir inherited. That's me. The courts will confirm it. Uncle Charles already has. He pushed back from the desk, pacing like a caged animal. "You think you can walk in here, after all these years, and take my company?" "Our company," I corrected. "And I don't need to take it. It's already mine." He spun toward me, red-faced. "You're a teacher, Evan. You don't belong in boardrooms." I met his eyes. Dad said the same thing once. Turns out he was wrong. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. I turned to leave. "Don't bother calling your lawyers. They'll call me." As I reached the door, he spoke again, voice trembling. "What do you want, huh? Money? Fine, I'll buy you out." I looked back at him. "You couldn't afford it." Then I walked out. 2 weeks later, the corporate transfer was finalized. My name, Evan J. Callahan, appeared in the official documents beside his. The media called it an unexpected restructuring. Ryan called it a betrayal. I called it truth finally surfacing. Uncle Charles helped me set up my position quietly. I didn't take a board seat right away. I didn't want the spotlight. Not yet. Instead, I went back to teaching. I still loved watching my students' faces light up when they understood something that once seemed impossible. Chemistry had always been about reactions, one element changing another, quietly, powerfully. Maybe life was too. A few months later, I visited Dad's grave for the first time since the will reading. The marble headstone gleamed under the Texas sun. I set the briefcase beside it, newly restored, the locks working again. "I opened it," I said softly. "I finally understand." The wind rustled through the live oaks. Somewhere nearby, a mockingbird sang. "You played the villain," I whispered. "But you were saving me. Both of you were." I smiled faintly. "And don't worry, I'll keep teaching. It's who I am. But I'll take care of what you built. Properly this time." As I turned to leave, the sunlight caught on the brass handle of the briefcase. For a second, I swore I saw my reflection overlap with both of theirs, Raymond's stern eyes and Vincent's grin. Two fathers. Two legacies. And me, the son who inherited both. These days, my students ask why I still teach when my family owns hotels. I tell them chemistry explains everything. Because sometimes the smallest reaction creates the biggest transformation. Because sometimes, the element that everyone ignores is the one that changes everything. And because, in the end, the briefcase that looked worthless turned out to carry something far greater than money, it carried truth. Would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.